Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Creativity. Thanks for tuning in from wherever you are at. And I'm so excited about this evening's guest because we're going to have a really great conversation. We're speaking with Kimberly Kernehan this evening, and Kim is an art therapist, among other things, and she's going to talk to us about some of that this evening. So thank you for joining us, Kim. I know that everyone's going to enjoy this conversation. I first wanted to ask you about something that really interests me, and it's artistic self expression.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
so I always think of that as leading to, personal healing if you can use it in that way. And
Mhm.
I know myself, if I'm doing something artistic, my mood, lightens. It just puts me in a better place. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about like personal healing, whether it's emotional, even physical, by allowing ourselves to express through art.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for having me here. I'm very, very excited. In regards to art and its healing potential and transformation potential, as an art therapist, for many years, I actually worked with active duty military coming back from the wars over in Iraq and Afghanistan, and those are some tremendously wounded souls, and it's amazing with art, because it gives voice to an actual narrative story that they have going through their heads. But with trauma, it's very hard for us to explain. In talk therapy, somebody will come and say, "Well, tell me about your trauma." And you kind of look at them blankly because you can't formulate words to wrap around those, emotions. Um, and that's just because, our frontal cortex shuts down during trauma, and perceived danger. And we all run on our hindbrain, our reptilian brain,
Mhm.
just for basic survival. So utilizing the creative means, whether it's art or music or movement, dance, bibliotherapy, writing, that all comes from a central aspect of the brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala is kind of our emotion center, and that's where a lot of our creative processes also start.
Mhm.
And so it's really like for myself as a clinician, to see someone come in and say, "I'm not an artist. I can't even draw, a straight line with a ruler, stick figures, I can't even do them. Please don't make me do this." And all I would really say to them is that I just want you to try. And it's really not about coming up with a Picasso or a Monet at the end, and having a product that you can sell. It's about the process that you go through of self discovery. And it really, truly is that self discovery process, because I take in my sessions and try to take the judgment away. I tell them there's only two rules. The first rule is that there's no mistakes in art, and the second rule is that there's no rules. So and just seeing the transformation, I have seen, these big burly guys come in, that are army and military, and totally against, I'm not going to do this stuff. And after just sitting down and, doodling, or, just kind of getting kinetically involved, whether it's clay work or anything like that, all of a sudden they go to this place within themselves, just like a meditation process. Um, and it's a process that they learn, to deal with those emotions that they haven't been able to put voice to. And it truly is an amazing process to watch someone go from being so shut down and so closed minded to somebody all of a sudden that is just enveloping their own creativity, and just um, blossoming, and reconnecting, because with art, in that whole process, it really is a spiritual process. We are all born creative. It just depends on what format it takes for each one of us. So to see them go through that transformative process, and realize that they can do this, and it builds up their self-esteem and their self-worth and everything. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing, whether it's somebody in the military or a child that you're, doing art activities with, or an adult who really is just kind of struggling and needs to some way process emotions that they are dealing with in an everyday society kind of thing.
Mhm.
uh, so yeah, it really is a true healing. I know personally myself, as a child, I never carried around baby dolls, and all of that.
Mhm.
I was carrying around a sketch pad and crayons,
Mhm.
and going out in nature, and just kind of really, being connected. And I was very blessed to have that kind of a childhood, that I was able to connect and just be kind of that free spirit. Um, so, and it kind of followed me all the way up through, to, like, I became an art teacher, an artist, and now a creative arts therapist. So it's kind of followed me through, and I've used art as my own, healing process, as well.
Right. Um, there are two things, Kim. One, before we do have a question, so I'm going to read that. But before you answer that, I was thinking about sometimes folks might think, well, like you were saying, I'm not creative or I don't do art.
Mm.
And they might have a more narrow view than what you're thinking of. So if you can just sort of address that, like, how we can see a broader picture of what art is or what our personal art might be. And then I will tell you the question, which is by last week's guest, Peterson, where he's asking you to please talk about the mask project from
Ah,
the
yes.
NEH course and what you have seen in terms of growth by the students in that course.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
if you just want to address what you see as art, and then if you want to
Sure.
talk about the mask project.
Well, you know how they say everything is in the eye of the beholder? And that is so true with art. When we say art, we automatically go towards either musical or visual arts, or,
Mhm.
dance movement. We're thinking of the genres of it. But in actually, art is something, anything that brings you joy and pleasure and puts you in that spot of just being interconnected.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people, I mean, cooking, culinary, they call it culinary arts for a
Mhm.
reason. There is really just, anything really. I mean, I'm out on my lawn tractor mowing, and to me, that gets me in, that zone. That to me is an art, because there's a certain pattern in which that I, transverse my lawn tractor, and and it sets me into that mood. So really, art is very open, and it's a very, subjective concept, because it really is truly whatever you believe it is.
Mhm.
So that's why I try, like with my clients, to just open that up, get rid of the preconceived notions. Okay, you might, feel that you're not somebody who can draw or paint, but um, but you write poetry, or maybe you play guitar, or you sing, or you cook and you bake. And that's your way of expressing yourself, and also your love for other people, by giving them your baked goods or cooking dinner for them. So really, it truly is just, what you label it as, or
Mhm.
what I like to say is, don't label it. Just if you can be with it and it brings you joy, and it really just, sparks that interest and that drive in you, that's art. And as
Exactly.
for and as for, you said it was Ray that was
Yeah.
asking a question. How dare you, Ray? um, Being involved with, the honor and sacrifice curriculum that Jefferson Community College has out in Watertown. This is the fourth year, even though last year because of COVID, we didn't have. I think it was kind of hit or miss. Ray can probably correct me on that, but I know that last year, as the art therapist, each year I go in for like a 2 or 3 hour segment, and I actually do inside outside mask work with the veterans that are part of this program. And because there again, it's a completely humanitarian viewpoint,
Mhm.
through like um, art, and they have to do like history. And also it's all of that curriculum that is involved in writing and all of that. So I do the art piece along with Lucinda Barber, the actual professor there, and I bring in just some blank masks, and I ask them to just express themselves. The inside mask is how they perceive themselves, and things that are going on within their own psyche. The outside masks are actually how they feel that they're being perceived, or how others think they're being perceived or see them
Mhm.
as. um, and a lot of them also use the context of, well, on the outside, I was a soldier, but on the inside, I'm a very wounded, soul.
Mhm.
So we allow them that process of going through that. And, I tell them this is, not a therapy session. This is, part of this curriculum. And it's just truly amazing them sitting down there again, getting in that zone, and getting past the resistance of, well, I can't do this, and just allowing it. And the growth, that you see from them sitting there with just this blank, mask in front of them, to 2 hours later having this almost fully engulfed mask, that really truly tells the angst, and everything that's going on within them, within their psyche, and then the perceptions of how they feel people see them on the outside. It truly is amazing. And the comments that we've gotten from the veterans, when they have completed this task, is just, they're like, I didn't know I had this in me, and it opened up dialogue for them to be able to then process further all of this pain and this PTSD and everything that they've been carrying with them, for sometimes years. And it allows that to kind of open up. And there again, art is a visual narrative story of what's going on internally. And so they're talking about their art piece, but in reality, they begin opening up about the trauma. And so,
Right.
therefore, it opens that dialogue up. And so, it's great to be a part of this program and just to see it grow and flourishing. Just recently, I believe, 7 masks have been chosen, and they are actually hanging over in the U.S. Embassy over in London, England. The State Department, I guess, had contacted JCC and said, we want some of these masks to be part of this show that they have on there, in regards to 9/11. And so it's my understanding that the 7 artists or veterans are going to be able to go over to London and actually see their masks, being presented and displayed firsthand. So that's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. And when you talk about mask, you just explain what type of mask you're talking about. Is it like a clay, like a decorative mask, or
Actually,
is it
it's
something that you just display somewhere? Obviously, it's not a mask you physically wear.
Actually, these are paper mache masks,
Okay.
and that I mostly get like through an artist, warehouse,
Hmm.
like Dick Blick or Michaels or something like that. And they're blank. They're just usually white or kind of like a brownish, paper mache. Very, nondescript, because you want the client to be able to put their impression upon it.
Right.
And they usually do have like little hangers, on the back. But I bring any kind of material for them to use. I bring hardware, nuts, bolts,
Mhm.
screws, wire,
Mhm.
because it's amazing. It's those hard edged, um, rustic, kind of things that really kind of that they can penetrate, the actual mask, because that's how
Mhm.
they're feeling. And so I not only with the paint and markers and oil and chalk pastels and everything else, they also have these hard edged modalities to use, materials that can to really quote unquote get their point across.
Right. That's so important. I think so often, even today, I still feel like there's so little for veterans
Mhm.
when they return, to give voice to what happened to them or how they're feeling, and then to be able to, um, reintegrate into society. Like I still feel like so often they just come back and they're dropped off, and whatever is the standard debriefing or something, it just doesn't do the job for a lot of veterans. And so I think, artistic self-expression, something where they can give voice,
Mhm.
um, through, art to their experience, is really
Absolutely.
needed. And
But
so
in all
it's really
actuality,
interesting.
right. But in all actuality, from like the beginnings of, these wars 20 years ago,
Mhm.
when that first, line of defense was coming back, there was, I mean, nothing there, no debriefings, very, very minimal,
Mhm.
and they were kind of sent on their way. Here's your 30-day pass, have at it kind of deal. But since all of the PTSD being really brought to the forefront of the American population's mind, it really the military has stepped up to the plate and has tried to diminish the like labeling and the shaming, for seeking treatment, but also has integrated and embedded, like psychologists and psychiatrists, like right within the units, even being deployed. So we
Mhm.
have made some headway for sure. But the atrocities that these individuals are experiencing, I don't think, I know personally I could not fathom. And
Mhm.
believe me, I've heard years upon years upon years vicariously these traumas. And
Mhm.
I, just keep thinking to myself, my God, what I'm experiencing just listening to it, I can only imagine what they experienced having to perpetrate or to just be a part of,
Mhm.
those atrocities. So, but we are getting
Exactly.
better. Um, at actual federal level, there is the Creative Forces Network, which was actually deemed out of the National Endowment for the Arts, and it's the National Endowment for the Humanities that is funding the curriculum at JCC. But National Endowment of the Arts, a few years ago, started the Creative Forces Network, and what they started to do was open up at different bases, art therapy, and music therapy. And
Mhm.
because actually at one point I was hired and moved to Colorado, to Fort Carson there in Colorado Springs, to help start up their art therapy program.
Mhm.
So we are, the military is getting a lot better, and they are realizing they actually are now, like with yoga, that's actually part of, their basic training anymore, is because they find that it makes their soldiers more resilient, and flexible, not only
Mhm.
body wise but mind wise as well. So
Yeah. That's really interesting, and that at least is good to know. As you're talking, we're talking about this artistic self-expression and healing, and I'm thinking what you're really describing through a lot of this is like a meditative and contemplative process that
mhm,
sort of guides, us into this inner wisdom, or bringing something forth from that spark within. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about using art in that, if you see it that way, and
Yeah.
what you think
Absolutely.
that.
Even though I'm clinically based with a lot of the art therapy, but
Mhm.
personally I'm like an intuitive artist, so a lot of it is just going to the canvas, for me personally, um, getting my hands right in there with the paint, and just allowing the process to happen, to allow myself just to feel and to kind of use my arms as an extension as to what I've got going on in my soul, and allowing that my hands to help give that voice. And it's the same with the work that I do. It really is about allowing that person just to take the resistance away, to take the judgment away, and just be and learn about themselves in that process.
Mhm.
And it really is a very intuitive, very connecting, very meditative process in which, you just, we have to get out of our own way.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. I was thinking, so, it's contemplative, meditative, it guides us. You're talking about intuition. Those are all things that we can use for personal transformation. I know you work with substance abuse as well, but any of our addictions, it can be an addiction to the negative thoughts that we have or drama in our life. It's easy to get addicted to that. And then, of course, all the other addictions that, that maybe we think of as being more common. I'm wondering if you can talk about how we can use that artistic self expression in that personal transformation.
Well, I think a lot of it is, my personal self and also with my clients is starting with journaling and
Hmm.
starting that internal thought process, um, and then working from there, developing maybe like an art journal, so that you're doing a little bit of art as well as journaling. But it really is just sitting down and being still. I usually start my practices I go into like a meditative state. I'll listen to a little bit of soft music or a guided meditation. I do smudging, so it's really developing a ceremony around it, I believe. That was one thing that I really like instituted when I was working as an inpatient rehab counselor for addictions. And I mean, there's such a disconnect between mind, body, and spirit with anyone that has suffered trauma, anyone that has suffered from addictions, anybody that has just suffered from mental health. So it's really showing them where the disconnect lies, but then giving them the tools in which to bring those pieces back together. And I had developed like a morning, I called it a morning mindfulness. So I would take the clients for the first half an hour of their day, and we would go into a room and I would present them a kind of a, not an existential question, but something to really kind of get them thinking. And then have them, answer that. And then we would do a reading. I would go into the guided meditation, and then after the guided meditation, I would do another short reading, and then I would do kind of like just an improv wrap up for it. And it was amazing because so many of these, individuals, they were like, Kim, I have never ever even attempted, to meditate or attempted to, do anything creative, because I would do a creative expression group with them as well.
Hmm.
And they were like, I feel so in touch with what's going on with myself. I'm much more aware of how my body's feeling and what my body's saying to me. And I'm just, I'm really starting to get that spark of hope back, the
Hmm.
spirituality connection. So it really is, that kind of process of just reconnecting ourselves, but, having the tools in which to do it.
It sounds like that's like really bringing them into the present moment. And
Yes.
it's making me think about how, when we express through art, it's doing like the inner and the the inner work, and then, having an outer example or evidence of the inner work that you did,
Hmm.
which makes it really, to me, very like special, because a lot of the things that we do every day, some things might seem productive, and not that they're not productive in some way, but not for that inner healing and inner awareness. And so I think that's really an important thing about art, and why it should be valued. And it's almost, um, I'm thinking about how about the value of art, and how everyone needs to know, that's the sort of sacred or divine or holy part of themselves. And I always think of it as, it's our birthright
Hmm.
to express ourselves that way. And yet, it's not always offered, even in the school curriculum, uh,
Right.
a lot of times, or, deemed worthy. So I wondered if you had any comments on to add to that.
Well, absolutely. I think, in regards to like the schools, I mean, they have certain curriculum, certain standards, unfortunately, that they have to adhere to very strictly. Um, but I think we need to get away, especially in the art, the music realm, of being so, okay, you've got to draw, a red flower with a green stem, you've got to color in the lines. We need to allow people the freedom of expression, no matter what that looks like to them. Um,
Mhm.
there we have to get away from the monetary value that we place on. I fell into that quite a few years ago, because I really wanted to develop more of my artistic, business, kind of say, to be able to be, it would be great to be a full-time artist.
Mhm.
And of course, with that, you got to think about, the monetary value and placing that in selling your work. Um, but it really isn't about that, and I think we get so wrapped up into that monetary value that, well, if I'm not that good, I can't, who's going to buy my work, or who's going to listen to that song that I wrote, or who's going to read that poem that I just wrote, or that book that I wrote. um, and we automatically tie that in, and that constricts our spirituality. It constricts, our intuition. It just constricts us creatively. So it really is about just releasing, letting go of all of that, monetary value, and just the materialistic value to that, and just allow ourselves to be. Cavemen were drawing on caves, way back before, before now it's, I mean, if somebody could sell one of those caves, it would be worth multi-millions of dollars, right? But they did it as a way of expressing, and as a way of really, kind of a visual diary of what they did that day. And that
Right.
really is what it needs to get back to, like, for, each one of us, no matter what that creative process looks like, is really just allowing it to happen, and really just embracing it.
It's really like a universal language.
It
If
is.
you're talking about the cave paintings, we can go back and look at those, and, it might have been a painting of their day, what they did that
Hmm.
day. So through the symbols, it really helps us build a relationship with one another, and, on a small scale or a big scale, and
Absolutely.
it can be used as a language. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, different archetypes and everything that you have, and music is the
mhm.
universal language as well,
uh, exactly. I mean, when you get into the arts, is, however we think of them,
Hmm.
um, I always think of that as how really lends itself to communicating with someone that you may not be able to communicate with verbally, because you don't speak the same language.
Hmm.
But when you get into music, or, other types of art, then it takes away that barrier that's put up. Um, we do have a couple comments I want to read too before we have to wrap it up, and
Okay.
they're both here from Ray, Kim. So earlier, Ray said, speaking of making art while mowing, I had to pause from mowing the lawn this afternoon to come inside and write down some thoughts that came to me for my next novel. And so I think that is a good point, because
Absolutely.
when we free our mind doing something like that's when the creativity kicks in. And he was
Mhm.
talking about your program, saying a great program. I learned a lot from both of you. Well, I think most of that comes from you, comes from you tonight, but you're just a fountain of information. We could go on for hours because this is so interesting, and you really are. Um, Obviously, it's your work, it's your training, but so knowledgeable and insightful about it too, Kim. So I hope that at some point you'll come back and talk to us so that we can continue our conversation.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
And that would be great, informative and great fun. And I just want to mention that next week's show, I'm going to have a very interesting guest, Nicole Romero, and we'll be talking about writing and voice and being the sort of hero of your own journey. So that should be interesting. I hope everyone joins in for that. And again, I want to thank you so much for being here this evening. Well, it's evening where I'm at. Also, Lori had a comment. You knocked it out of the park. So did a really good job. Really good job. And so I want to thank everyone for the comments, and I hope you'll join us next week. And again, thank you, Kim. We'll be looking forward to having you come back.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.